Hey, it has been a minute. I know I haven't dropped any videos in a long time. I have been so busy behind the scenes. I started a new job and I'm just taking care of my family and doing normal stuff. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Wendy. I used to be an XJW for over 30 years and I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse as well. And I just started making videos and here we are. There's nothing special about me. There's no letters behind my name. I just decided, you know what, I'm going to tell my story and I want other people to feel that they can tell their story too. So that's how we formed this little community here. Be sure to hit that little bell at the top of your screen. It just lets you know that when I do drop a video, you'll be the first to know. And if you want to support the channel, the best way you could support the channel is just like, share, and subscribe. I don't have a Patreon and I never will. In addition to having this amazing guest on, there is some hot news in the life of an XJW. We have Tony Morris, who is no longer a member of the governing body. Thank God, because he is just a wretched human being. And I don't make videos on stuff I know nothing about. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. I'm really glad he's not a member of the governing body. I would like to see one by one, all of them just kind of disappear into thin air the way they think we're going to disappear into thin air. But I digress. I don't really know why he's not a member of the governing body. There was like, I don't know, 13 words, and it's not even on the website anymore, which is equally suspicious. But I don't know, and I don't pretend to know. But hey, you know what? It was big news in the life of HAW. Actually, more big news in the life of an XJW, because how many PMEs did you know didn't even know, right? They didn't even know that he wasn't a member anymore. It's just so sad that they don't even really know the religion that they're in. But I can't really discredit them much because when I was in there, I didn't pay much attention either. Anyway, let's talk to David. Maybe you are one of those XJWs who want to reach out to your congressman, to a journalist, just don't know where to start. I am one of those people. And I even pride myself on being a writer, more like a hobbyist, but I typically know what to say in a letter. But when it comes to this, sometimes I'm at a loss. So if you want to know what to say and how to say it, this video might be for you. David, it is such an honor to have you on the channel. For those of you who don't know David, he is a friend of the channel. As I mentioned, he is family of Joe and Fran Guarino. They were on our last episode. For those of you who didn't see that episode, it's linked in the description box. Go back and watch it. They've become family to all of us since their episode aired. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Wendy. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So take us back. What brought you here? And you are not and never were one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So tell us exactly what brought you here.
My background is rather interesting. I think I ran a number of non-for-profit organizations in my earlier professional life. And then later in life, I got into higher education. And I was very fortunate. I was an adjunct professor at a private business college here in Utica, New York, where I live. And I was there for 5 years, which is insane because adjunct professors don't last 5 years. They're lucky if they last 1 year. Because unlike a full professor who has tenure, which means it's almost impossible for them not to have a job, it's not granted to adjuncts, which is really unfortunate, but that's another story. So after 5 years teaching, I was fortunate again to get a position as an adjunct professor at one of our local community colleges here in Utica, New York. And I taught 10 years in their management department, teaching macro and microeconomics, marketing, human resource management, labor laws, so forth and so on. So that was pretty cool, and I had a great time doing all of that. While I was teaching at MVCC, the Mohawk Valley Community College, and I can't even remember how this happened, honestly, because I've been out of teaching now since 2015. But I do remember in my earlier years into the college, there was, I saw a newspaper in one of the student lounges. I was just passing through and I picked it up. It was called Campus News. And I opened it up and I started reading it. I said, oh, this is kind of cool. And at that time, I was fooling around with writing. I had some stories that I was doing, fictional and nonfiction stories. And I was reading this campus news to come to find out it was the largest community college newspaper in the country. So I turned to the back and I read the edits and everything, and I saw the name of the executive, the editor and owner, and I contacted him and I told him that I did some writing and I'm a adjunct professor. Can I write for you? And he said, send me a sample. So I did, and he got back to me and he said, you're hired. So I wrote for them for about 7 years, 8 years. I had my own column. And then when I got out of college and I stopped writing for campus news, I picked up another writing gig, which I'm still writing for today. It's a company in Oswego, New York, up by the Canadian border. And it's called Mohawk Valley in Good Health. It's all about mental health, physical health, spiritual health. And I got that gig about 7 years ago, and I'm a senior writer for them. So that's what I do. I'm retired from teaching. I'm all writing. So what does this all mean? Okay. So Fran and Joe Garino, as you mentioned, Wendy, are my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They were in Jehovah's Witnesses for 36 years. And one day my wife and I were over visiting. And I could tell something was going on because they were, I'm very good with body language. And I could just knew something was up. And I have a very good sense of intuition, and my psychic abilities were like flying. I said to my wife, something's going on with your brother and your sister-in-law. Well, as we were leaving, Joe stopped me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he was almost crying. And I said, oh my God, what's going on? And he goes, David, he goes, I want you to know something. I want Marcella to know this too. I said, what? He goes, Fran and I are in the process of leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, I didn't know what to say. I just kind of blanked out, and I looked at my wife and she looked at me. And then Fran started talking and she kind of teared up. And then we stayed, I think, for another hour talking to them about their struggle. How did this all happen? Why are they leaving? I mean, we always supported them. We never poo-pooed them because they were in the JW, but we always thought it was kind of odd, sure. To say the least. Yeah. So, we supported Joe and Fran, and eventually I was on my way out, and he said, David, he goes, you're a writer. I said, yeah. He goes, and I saw a lot of your stuff that I read a lot of things that you wrote. You're a good writer. I said, well, thank you. He goes, do me a favor. I said, what? Write an article about Jehovah's Witnesses and the terrible shunning that they do, because we're going to be going through that. I said, what do you mean, the shunning? And he started explaining to me. I said, what? Your family's going to divorce you? Your kids are never going to talk to you? What's that all about? Because, David, you got to write about this. So as we were leaving, Joe said, look, you're a writer. You're a good writer, and I enjoy reading what you write. Would you do me a favor? Would you write about the terrible shunning that Jehovah's Witnesses do? And I knew a little bit about the shunning, but didn't really know a lot. And I go, well, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. He goes, David, he goes, my family's going to shun me. My kids are going to shun me. They're not going to have nothing to do with me. Or Fran. I said, this is incredible. What's going on? So after he talked and stuff like that, he said, please think about this. I said, okay, I'll think. So I went home. I said to my wife when I got home, I said, I don't think I'm going to do it. And she goes, why? I said, I don't know. I just don't think I'm going to do it. And then I woke up the next morning and I said to my wife, I said, give me 24 hours. Let me meditate. Let me pray and see where God is directing me on this. I take my writing very serious. So I'm not flippant about it. And I really need to process it. So after 24 hours, the next morning I said to my wife, I'm going to call your brother. She goes, what are you going to say? I'm going to tell him I'm going to write it. So that was last year around, I believe, Wendy, around March of last year. And once I committed, I was all in. So from March, April, May, June, 4 months it took me to write this. Yeah. Yeah, this is a 5,000 word, very meaty, investigative article on shunning. And I was fortunate to have some great people that I was able to interview. Some Ken Mayo.
He's a friend of our channel. That's for sure.
Right. So I was all in. And the interesting thing was, and I think anybody who is going to listen to this and see this, who writes, oftentimes one of the hardest things for a writer is coming up with a title.
Yep.
Because your title is like your roadmap, takes you down the road. And without that title, you're kind of lost a little bit. And Joe said to me, I got a title for you. I said, what is it? He goes, is shunning the new old hate crime? I said, whoa. I said, wait a minute. I love this. What? Are you kidding me? So I immediately put that down. Of course, everything gets copyrighted, of course. So no one can lift it. And that's what I did. I wrote this 5,000 word article. And Joe and Fran at the beginning wanted me to kind of be a buffer between them and their children. In other words, he wanted me to kind of feel his kids out, because the kids were asking him, why aren't you going to meetings? How come you're not showing up? All this stuff.
So they didn't know at this point yet. He had confided in.
No, they had no clue.
Yeah.
They had no clue. I knew, my wife knew. They didn't know. So he said, Dave, I'm going to ask you another favor. He goes, I'm going to ask you to kind of be like a sacrificial lamb almost. Really, I don't know, those weren't the right words, but you know what I'm saying. It was very close. I said, in what way? He goes, I want you to talk to my kids and just feel them out and just say, hey, I talked to your mom and dad. I saw some stuff on YouTube about JWs, which I didn't. And, it was about, sex trafficking and child porn stuff or whatever, and horrible shunning and people committing suicide and killing, blah, 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 blah. I said, oh my God. He goes, David, please, can you do this for me? Okay, Joe, I'll sacrifice myself. And that's what I did. And I would feel his family out. And I said, your mom and I shared this with your mom and dad. And they would say, well, what'd they say? I said, well, they said that they think it's apostate. Oh, yeah, it is, and they would go on and on and on. And as things kept going forward with Joe and Fran moving away more and more from the JW, not going to the meetings and all that, things started to heat up more. And then finally, I kind of said to Joe and Fran, okay, I'm backing out now, as far as the buffer. I'll do what I can, but now it's got to come from you two. And which it did eventually, as you know. They left, their kids know, and they're being shunned. So this article I wrote, Wendy, the article, I said, I don't want this to be a 5,000 word -JW about shunning.
Right.
I need to mix this up with a secular and non-secular viewpoint. Okay. So, a non-secular, religious, secular, non-religious viewpoint. So I said, what else can I write? I said, I'll write about what's affected everybody, which is COVID-19. Because a lot of people have been shunned by COVID-19. If they didn't take the vaccine, if they didn't wear the mask, families were shunning them, right? Very similar to what's going on with the JW.
Very. So, yeah.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing. The article is top-heavy JW. So if I was to give you a percentage, I'd say out of the 5,000 words, I'd say 3,000 plus 3,500 is on JW, and the other 1,500 or so is on COVID-19 and shunning. And so I sent it out. And the other thing that's very hard for a writer, besides coming up with a title, probably the hardest thing is to get your stuff published. So I sent this out over the last 7, 8 months now, 6, 7 months, I guess, 7 months, whatever, to a number of places, publications. I've had 3 editors already contact me and say it didn't fit their themes, which is a nice way of saying no.
Right.
Which odd as it may sound, what I'm going to say is actually to hear back from an editor is pretty interesting, because they usually they just don't even call you. They didn't talk to you. They won't text you, nothing. You won't hear from them. But they took the time to get back to me. I said, okay. So as of right now, there's a publication called Virginia Quarterly Review. It's a very prestigious magazine. It comes out quarterly, 4 times a year. And my article is with them now. And it's going through the process. So I'm in what they call in progress mode.
Right.
So I'm going from the different editors to see if they can fit me in, and blah, 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 blah. Right. And I got my fingers crossed. I hope I can get that in there. That'll be wonderful. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Wow.
But it's a tough nut. It's a tough nut. But anyways, so what I wanted to do with this video as well is, people who are JWs, like my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, there's a lot of family that they have that are not JWs. My wife, she's not a Jehovah's Witness, neither am I. My father-in-law and mother-in-law, Joe's mom and dad, they were never Jehovah's Witnesses. So all these other people are still there. They're affected by this too, aren't they? Big time.
And we've never had someone on the channel from that perspective. Joe actually really helped me to appreciate that fact. My father was never a witness, and neither was my family. And it's interesting because now that I'm on this side of it, I notice that JWs not only shun their own when they decide they don't believe it anymore, but they shun the non-JWs as well and their perspective. So thank you so much for also coming to offer that perspective to us.
That is so true. And the sad thing about this, besides, of what my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are going through, they have 4 children. Now, 2 of those 4 children, my wife and I'll speak for her. I think I'm okay with this. We were never very close to, somewhat close, but they moved away and they're, not even around, The other 2 children are here, local. And his daughter, who's here, my wife and her have a very strong connection. And so my hope is that that connection stays. But we can see there's been a little bit of a pullback. Okay? It's not, I'm not saying that Joe's daughter is still not connected in with her aunt, my wife, Aunt Marcella. I think they still are. I mean, they talk a little bit, but you can tell there's not a big connection there. I used to have a pretty strong connection with her husband, Jeremy, who is an elder. And like Jeremy, myself, we share something in common. We are both fanatics about physics, quantum physics, quite honestly, and mathematics. And we would talk for hours on mathematics and physics and quantum mechanics and on and on and on. And I miss that. And I don't talk to him. I haven't talked to him or seen him in probably 7 months, I guess. And the other son who's still here, he has not reached out to me at all. He's not reached out to his aunt, my wife, Marcella. And so there's no connection there. So it affects all of us, affects everybody. And I just want to say, and I know I probably should have said this right from the beginning. Today is Joe's birthday.
Oh.
Tomorrow is Fran's birthday.
Oh.
Today, a dozen of us all got together, went to this beautiful Italian restaurant this afternoon, and they celebrated their birthdays together for the first time in 36 years. And Wendy, Fran looked at me, she said, "You're going to be on with Wendy. You're going to be on with Wendy tonight." I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Fran, I'm going to mention to Wendy that you celebrated after 36 years, your birthdays She goes, please do. And she was all teary-eyed, and it was
Oh,
marvelous. It was just a great time.
Fran
Yeah.
and Joe, you guys are watching this. Happy birthday. We love you very
Mhm.
much. They've adopted
Mhm.
a lot of people since their video
Yeah,
dropped.
they,
So,
they they really have. And you were very instrumental in getting their word out too. And they have high praise for you. Trust me,
oh,
they have high praise for you.
they
So,
just,
if you are a writer, how can you get this stuff out, or how can you get people to help you, right? To get the message out, right?
yeah.
It's not always easy, but there are ways you can do this. I would tell people to contact their local radio stations, particularly if you have a talk show that talks about all different issues. You may want to bring what you're going through onto that talk show. You never know who's going to be listening to these talk shows, right? You can open that up. You may also want to contact your local congresswoman or congressman or assemblywoman or assemblyman. Now, the reason why I say that is this, and I'll segue into this. I have a dear friend from way back in childhood days. I used to hang around with this guy, and John did very well in his life, and he eventually became a New York State assemblyman. He did 2 terms in Albany, and he was getting ready to run for the Senate, but he backed out at the last minute, and that's just another story. But whatever. John's very well connected politically, and I know him quite well. And he's now representing our new congressman, Brandon Williams, who just got into Congress, who represents our district. And John is his director of public affairs for our county. So John's got a big job. I told John what was going on. And John said, wow, I got to meet your brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And we all met at Dunkin' Donuts. We sat around, had coffee and donuts.
Mhm.
And John listened to Fran and Joe talk for over an hour. And then John says, I want you, David, me, to send me your article, which I did.
Mhm.
The next day, he got on the phone. He said, oh my God. He goes, I didn't know you were such a girl. You wrote that? I said, well, yeah, I wrote it. Took a long time. He goes, David, he goes, here's what I'm going to try to do for you. I'm ending this is my last term. I got a few more months, but I'm going to try to do this for you. When I go back in Albany in a couple of days, I'm going to talk to my staff, and I'm going to try to find out what person I can get this article in front of that would make some sense, where you can come down to Albany and present yourself to the assembly. Now, why? Well, your your listeners might be thinking, viewers are like, well, why? Where's he going? Well, there's a reason I'm going to this. Okay. So I said, okay, I will do that. So he goes off to Albany with my article. Okay. A week later, he gets back to me. He goes, David, he goes, I'm sorry, I couldn't get. People thought it was very interesting, but they wouldn't commit. It was a hot potato for them because the terms were ending. A lot of people were coming up for re-election, and because of First Amendment Constitution of free speech, they didn't want to get involved in that.
Right.
Okay. Even though, you know what I mean? It was just kind of funky for them. So I said, okay, because what I was trying to do, because hate crimes, Wendy, all the states in this country, except for Wyoming, North Carolina, and I think Arkansas, I may be wrong on that. So, I'm just going to put that caveat in. All have hate crimes except those 3 states. However, the federal government, through the Department of Justice, has a federal hate crime. And what my article was all about is I'm asking the Department of Justice, review your definition of a hate crime. We should put shunning in there as a hate crime. And I was trying to do it from more of a state, start with the state first and see if they would change their dialogue and their definition of a hate crime, and then maybe move on to the federal government. So it kind of stopped and blocked. It got blocked in the state assembly. My friend, who's a former assemblyman now, couldn't get through. But now, because he's working for the federal government and he's working for our new elected congressman, who I have met personally 3 times, I will be calling him pretty soon. my friend and saying, can you get me in front of a congressional hearing in Washington? Because I'll be on the first plane to go down there and let these people know what the hell is going on and that this has got to stop. And you know, Wendy, all these non-for-profits, they all receive tax incentives. They get all kinds of perks and breaks, right? Not in my book. Why should we give these people these perks and breaks if they have a unspoken, quote unquote, air quote, policy of stunning people to the point where they commit suicide and homicide?
Right, absolutely.
No,
right.
no. So I'm still working on this. This is all part of the article. This is where I'm going with all this. So I'm still pushing towards that day. Maybe I can get in front of a congressional hearing.
Well, and I don't know if you're familiar with Mark O'Donnell. Mark O'Donnell he's an XJW activist, so I can give you his information. He has a lot of contacts. He's the one who, in the XJW side, he speaks with reporters. He does a lot of the legal end of it. He has a lot of, I guess, like I said, contacts. The reason why I say that is because I reached out to him recently this week, because I don't know if you know what's going on in Pennsylvania with the the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro. He tried five different men that were Jehovah's Witnesses and committed CSA were convicted.
Yep.
The interesting thing is, and Mark brought this to my attention, is that it's the angle you have to go in when it comes to the different states. So, for example, I'm in Florida, a very red state. If you mention religion, they're not going to touch that because of the Christian conservatism. So there has to be a different route. That's why I really appreciated your angle of a hate crime. So to get around that, we are talking about politics. We're just going to dive right in here. New York is a blue state. Pennsylvania is a blue state. And people, well, they want voters. So what are they going to vote for? And to be honest, we're in the Jehovah's Witness world, but the rest of the world doesn't really pay attention to Jehovah's Witnesses. They just think they're that nice religion that knocks on doors and talks to people.
Yeah.
So this is the issue, is that for Jehovah's Witnesses or XJWs who want to do something, who there's tons of activists out there who maybe don't want to get on camera, but they do want to start pounding the pavement and knocking on doors to let the world know. There has to be an angle. And it has to, if you're going to go to your politicians, there has to be a reason, and it can't be just about religious reform, because that's not going to affect certain politicians. Would you agree to that?
I agree. It's all in the dialogue and what you're going to say. We have to tread easy because of the first. And I'm a big constitutionalist. I believe in our Constitution 100%.
Yeah.
But and the First Amendment, the right of free speech, right? It gets very, very fuzzy. It gets very I'm trying to think of the right word. You have to really be careful with this our first amendment of free speech, and a lot of people will back away from that.
I know, it's all over Twitter.
So these people, right, exactly, right. So, but like I said, there's so much evidence out there now. There's so much unfortunate JWs who've left, and probably a lot of the cases, probably a lot more than me, where they've been shunned so terribly that, like that case in Michigan. Are you familiar with that case in Michigan? Where the woman was, her husband and her children, they were shunned because they wanted to leave. And she was so distraught, she killed her husband, 2 children, and she put a gun to her head.
Yeah.
So and I've got that in my articles. Here's my question. And I post this in my article. Does this congregation that she belonged to, that did this draconian shunning, do they hold any responsibility at all for her death, her husband's, and her children's death?
Well, in Norway, Norway was going after the Watchtower organization too for human rights violations.
Yeah, but here's what I'm seeing, and again, this is in my article as well.
Yeah.
And I want to read, if I could, just a little bit of this.
Yeah.
Bring a piece into it. There's a little bit of a crack in the veneer that I see, and here's what I see. Because of the case in Belgium, which I'm sure you're familiar with, a lot of your readers are or viewers.
Mhm.
There was a ex-JW who sued the congregation
Mhm.
because he was being bullied and he was being harassed and blah, blah. Well, other ex-JWs joined in. It became a class action lawsuit. And what happened was the courts, when the ruling came down, it was the defendant. Pardon me. It was uh, the person, the gentleman who was suing, and along with the rest of the JWs, they won that court case, and basically just whittling it all down to more simple language. The lawyers basically, what the court basically said, we didn't award you, this finding based upon that you were disfellowship, because any organization has a right to let go of members. You can call it bye-bye, call it disfellowship, call it when they kick you out the door, whatever word you want to put on it, it's fine. They have the right to do that. They don't have the right to shun you in such an egregious way that it causes mental and emotional suffering. That's where they got them, right? So you see that, then you see in Norway, like you just mentioned, that congregation up there, the government is not funding them anymore. It's not giving them any more money because of the draconian shunning. So these court cases start to pick up, and they have a life of their own, and they start to migrate around the world, and people pick up on it, and other lawyers and other courts and this and that. And I see that possible. I see that happening here. I do. Right now, the courts are more involved with the JWs on sex trafficking, sexual abuse, child abuse, and all that stuff. But the shunning stuff is starting to come, and it's gonna mushroom out. I really do believe that. It's gonna take a little time, but it's gonna happen. It really will. Yeah. So.
And recently, the Watchtower was actually interviewed, and they said that they actually don't teach their people to shun. That people on the side of the organization they make their own choices, but there's a misunderstanding there of coercion and indirect policy.
Well, that's you know this better than me, but that's a big lie. That's
yeah, of course.
I mean, disfellowship. When I understand it, talking to my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, as soon as you're disfellowship, it kicks in the shunning. The shunning starts, and who's not going to not shun? Because everybody shuns in the Jehovah's Witnesses. I have never come across anything in my research that shows that if someone leaves, they don't shun them. I mean, they may shun them partially. There might be some contact, but most of it is complete 100% shunning. Complete. You're dead. You're gone. You get out. We're not going to talk to you. You're an apostate or whatever.
Oh yeah, I've been disfellowshipped. It's like watching over your life and what it would be like if you died.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. And
it's terrible.
There have been a number of people who have tried to reach out to reputable journalists. So my question also for you is, as a writer and as a journalist, so you read an article, for example, right? And you see the journalist's name under that article, you follow their Twitter, and you think you have a story. You want to partner up with them. What is the best way? I mean, yes, they have an email, but what is the way to be heard? For example, I have reached out to Florida Attorney General. I have done my fair share of sending constant emails, writing letters, and linking reputable stories to no avail. And I'm not saying I'm gonna, get answers right away, but to avoid being discouraged, is that the right way to do it? What is the way to how loud do you have to be to get someone to pay attention to you?
Well, the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a long road, Wendy.
Okay.
I don't have a magic pill or any one thing to say to make it happen. I mean, I look just what I've gone through, with my former assemblyman friend trying to get me down to Albany, all the different places that I've contacted, trying to get this published. I contacted a local radio show. They never got back to me. You never know what's in people's heads. You just have to, if you see somebody and you see something, you like it, you try to contact the author.
Okay.
Usually there's a way to do it. You can get online. Usually they have a bio or some kind of a platform. And then you can contact them and say, listen, I was very moved by your article. How can I contribute or be part of this and whatever?
Oh.
Now here's what I'm going to say. You're going to really scratch your head with this, right? After I just said this. I am not
Often.
on, oh, really? No, I'm an odd duck. I really am, because I am not on any social platform whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on Facebook, which I call fake book. I'm not on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm on nothing. I have no podcast, nothing. It's just me and my email.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if people want to reach me, they can reach me by email. I keep it very simple. I don't get involved in a lot of social media stuff. I try to work my way through contacts of people, live, real people that I can say, hey, I've got this. Do you know what's going on? You understand what's happening here? Let me educate you for a minute. Can I talk to you for a minute? Sometimes you'll get an error. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes people just, I'm not interested.
Right.
That's the only thing I can tell you. You got to have courage. You have to have some tenacity. You got to have the energy, and you got to just keep going. And somewhere along the line, you'll come across someone that will say, yeah, I want to hear what you got to say. I think maybe we can help one another.
But different angles the angle is important too. The fact that you've brought out quite extensively how it is a hate crime. I don't think I've ever thought of that. I don't know if you in the audience have thought of that.
I mean, obviously, this is my personal opinion. But let me just read. Let me just read for you a couple of things. So let's just, this is the definition of a hate crime, but the U.S. Department of Justice, who prosecutes hate crimes, and they have been since 1968. So they refer to hate crimes as a serious threat of violence or significant property damage that's committed against one or more persons based on their ethnic background, national origin, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious beliefs, okay, or disability. And they say that hate crimes can be reported to the Department of Justice, and then it goes up to the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, the interesting thing here is, because so many because so many hate crimes involve physical altercations, it's understandable that these types of attacks stand out more and attract more attention. Okay, though harder to classify the veracity. Let me just get the veracity of hate and emotional or psychological abuse levied towards people in direct psychological attacks is frequently no less damaging than actual physical attacks. That's me. Okay, so I'm drawing that comparison. So let me just go down just a little bit more to give you a little bit more of an insight here. There are many different ways to inflict psychological pain. And I go on and I basically talk about, you can delete someone from any social platform with a click of a keystroke, right?
Right.
I don't want to be your friend anymore on Facebook. Boom, gone. I don't want to be, I'm not going to Twitter. Whatever. You got the technology just to wipe someone right off, right?
Right.
We can do that instantaneously, right? But we also can do it through an act, as you well know, that's called shunning, which obviously causes a lot of problems. Now, that's what I say. I said, of all the religious groups that practice shunning, the Amish and the Scientologists are two of the frequently publicized examples. But again, there are many religious groups that practice shunning, including religions that are more integrated and accepted by mainstream media. For example, in recent years, disturbing news about the Jehovah's Witnesses has come to light, and the organization has been under public and legal scrutiny, in part because of its use of shunning. JWs are small in number compared with many other religious organizations, reporting an approximate membership of 8.5 million in 2021. Now, that could have changed since then. Yet, incidents of sexual abuse and inhumane shunning practices of the JWs have been receiving significant media attention as of late. Now, have you heard of a woman named Debbie Glander?
No.
Debbie Glander. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay. Give me a second here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Debbie Glander.
Okay.
Debbie Glander is a licensed marriage family therapist practicing in Davis, California. She's been in practice for 12 years. She was a Jehovah's Witness for about 8 years. Now, here's where it gets interesting, Wendy. And I had 2 interviews with this woman. She was marvelous. She was a Jehovah's Witness from the ages of 7 years old to 14 years old. Please hold on to that in your head as I keep going through. This is what she says, quote, "My story is a little different than many other JWs because I was not a born-in. I was brought into it when my parents divorced, and eventually my dad remarried, and his new wife was a JW. And he became baptized into the religion. I was not baptized because I was very young, and then I got out. I saw as a young person, remember she was 7 through 14, I saw as a young person and didn't quite understand it, members of your organization being shunned. I didn't even know what the word meant. I just knew we were not allowed to talk to some of our family or even acknowledge that they existed. So I just knew there was this really uncomfortable, mean thing we had to do to certain family members." End quote. So Glander says that in her professional and personal opinion, the JW shunning practice is one of the worst because it is so invasive. She further elaborates, "I had an aunt on my stepmother's side who I really liked. She was a very kind woman. She really wanted to leave the organization. And I remember when she came into the Kingdom Hall, we couldn't even look at her. She had to sit in the back. She finally realized she couldn't handle not having a relationship with her family. I was forced to shun her. Even her mother was shunning her. Unbelievable, isn't this? It's incredible." Glander explains that her aunt succumbed to the pressure to do what she had to do in order to regain favor with the church. But Glander never forgot this. Here it is. Quote, "At 14 years of age, I remember the horrible treatment that the organization subjected her to. I remember thinking to myself, 14 years of age now, why would she want to come back? She got out." That's just a snippet of this woman's interview that she gave me. Just a snippet. So all of this, again, my whole article is to ask the question, should this be considered a hate crime? Should people be held accountable? Again, people commit suicide. Could people commit homicide? I interviewed Ken Mayo. I got a huge piece on him. I'm not going to go through that with you today, but I got a big piece on Ken Mayo, how he talks about a friend of his who shot himself, recovered, but shot himself in the head. And another person not far from where he lived who killed his whole family and himself because he was shunned.
Right.
Someone's got to be held accountable. So this is what I basically say. So I say, should shunning then be considered a hate crime? There is undisputable proof that shunning can and does cause significant emotional problems, some so severe that they lead to suicides and homicides or extreme mental illness. So I'm asking, I'm basically talking to the Department of Justice when I say this. Should there be some action here? Should there be? And then I go on to say, as previously mentioned, the court system is careful when considering taking legal action against religious organizations as a result of our First Amendment rights. However, legal action has been brought against JW and other religions for sexual abuse by clergy. Does this indicate a possible crack in the veneer? So once the courts get a hold of something and lawyers they get a hold of something and they see that there's this going on, okay, with the JWs. Right. Oh, wait a minute. Now there's also this going on called shunning. Right. So you see, that's why I believe there's a crack in the veneer. Once these cases start coming out and they're exposed, then the shunning stuff. Well, right now it's on this deviant sexual abuse of kids and horrible stuff, sure. which should be criminalized. Absolutely, well, yeah. There's no question about it. Right. But from there percolates up other issues within that organization.
Yeah, you're talking about, in addition to the obvious,
Right.
crimes. So the ones that are already well known, the ones we're already fighting against, there are more situations that could be classified as
That's
crimes.
right.
We just need to
That's
draw
right.
more attention to it. Here's an issue, and I'm gonna tell you where we hit a wall. Because the Jehovah's Witnesses are so clever in their
Mhm.
work, and they've been on the stand repeatedly and have said that they don't actively teach people to shun, that people, as we said earlier, that people make their own decision. The problem with
Right.
that is that now we're getting into who's to say I'm wrong for no longer wanting a person in my life, that I cut them out of my life because my, in my, what's the word? That my values don't align with theirs. So am I now guilty of a hate crime too? That is what we're running into as well.
Right. It's a slippery slope, and
Yeah,
there's a lot of moving parts to this.
it
This
is.
is not easy stuff
No,
because
not
the courts can easily say, "Wait a minute, you left this organization,
by choice. Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
by choice,
Right.
and now the members don't want to talk to you. Well,
Right.
suck it up, get on with your life." But we know
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more to this than just you're gone from the organization.
Mm-hmm.
There's cases of, I mean, my God, I could have probably spent just a year on all the different cases of homicide and suicide. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have time. I just didn't. Okay. I'm writing for other people. I just don't have the time.
Right.
But and I know
Mm-hmm.
the how egregious this is, how horrible this kind of behavior is. And again, I'll go back to the protection that a lot of these organizations like JWs have. They're tax exempt, they're
Mm-hmm.
a religious organization, they get
Mm-hmm.
special treatment.
Right.
Why? If you're
I know.
doing this and this is happening. So you got to get in front of a group of politicians or a politician
Mm-hmm.
who this resonates with them. Maybe they had a family member that was a JW that went through something and they have a personal connection. I
Right.
don't know. And then they take the ball and they get rolling. I'm not going to give up. I am actually, today's what? Today's Wednesday, probably tomorrow or Friday, because I have my friend who's now I told you, he's the director of special affairs for our newly elected congressman. I have his personal cell number. He doesn't give that out to anybody. And I'll call him and I'll say, hey, John, work some magic for me. Get
Right.
a hold of the congressman. Let him know what's going on with this JW stuff. See if you can get me down to Washington in front of a committee that I
Well,
can
you're
talk.
right, because in Pennsylvania, there was an assembly hearing just the other day. Biggest reasons why is because I think he was a congressman. He was personally molested when he was a child by his Catholic priest, and he specifically
Yeah,
mentioned.
I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you're right, it's because he was personally affected.
Mhm.
We just have to kind of sift through it and find out who. I mean, sometimes you have to get in front of a bunch of people to find out who that person is. And so, yeah, we're not going to stop.
No, that's what I was saying earlier. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You have to
Yeah.
have the fortitude. You got to have the
Right.
patience. You
Right.
got to have the courage and the strength to keep pushing forward.
Mhm.
Because eventually eventually that person's gonna come into your life.
Yeah. Here's the
You know what I
trend.
mean?
Let me tell you the trend. People wake up. This is mostly, and I've experienced this firsthand. They wake up, they go through the trauma, they go through the rabbit hole of learning that it's not the truth. They go through the shunning. They start the healing process. They get into counseling. And then they move on with their lives. The thought of fighting against a behemoth of an organization
Yeah.
sometimes feels impossible because you're going
Mhm.
back and re-traumatizing yourself over
That's right.
and over again. And
Exactly.
it does feel like you need a certain kind of mental and emotional fortitude to go
Or,
against the behemoth,
or you need a good advocate.
which is why you're here to help us
Okay.
hire
All
coach.
right. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. But you need someone that could be your spokesperson.
Mhm,
Your talking head
mhm,
that will maybe can disseminate this information out. Like
mhm.
I said, I've never been to JW.
There have
I
been a few though. If you listen to I forget his name, I think his name was, he wrote the Vice articles, he did the Netflix or the Hulu specials. And viewers, please correct me if I'm wrong. But he is not a JW. He's a journalist who actively was uncovering the CSA cases. He just had an interest
Wow,
in digging into
really?
this religion. Yeah. So there are
Yeah.
people that are out there. It just seems like
Mhm.
it's one after another, and it's nonstop with these stories that come out. But they're, again, clever. Anybody who speaks against it is considered apostate, lies. Anyone.
Well, you know
That's the
what?
problem.
Yeah, and Wendy, what you just said is true, but don't underestimate your power and what you're doing and the
Oh.
changes you're making. Trust me, I see I see it here with my own family with Joe and Fran.
Oh,
So
I'm tired. I'm gonna be honest. I'm tired.
I know I don't know how many subscribers you have. I don't know how many people will listen. I don't know. I'm sure it's a vast number. So you never know who's going to tune in and see these videos and go, catch the right person, right
Yeah.
thing is said. Then they're on the phone talking to somebody, and that person's talking to somebody else, and that's how it's done.
You know, the
You
nature
know,
of the message that I talk about is that a majority of the people, I wouldn't know how many people are listening because they can't subscribe, because they can't download. I can't tell you how many women, especially, have reached out to me
okay,
anonymously because
okay,
they can't,
yeah,
they don't want to be caught. And so a lot of people kind of are in limbo, suffering in silence. The other
yeah,
thing
right,
is
right,
alarming to me is, since I've been doing this just for about 2 years now, the amount,
yeah.
my number is public, the amount of people who have reached out on the brink of jumping off a cliff. And
Oh,
I am not a licensed counselor. I mean, that is why I put myself out there, because I remember that feeling and I'm never going to forget that.
yeah,
But right, more needs to be done. And this is what I keep saying. I can create videos till kingdom come, which is not really coming. I could create all these videos, but now what? And I really appreciate your advocacy and your help
well, thank you.
and your book and the way that you're helping us on this side. But one
Well,
thing I really value is your version of the shunning, even from a non-JW perspective. That's
well,
fascinating.
thank you. I'm glad Joe pushed me. I
Oh,
really am, because I tell you, I wasn't going to do it. This is an investigative article that brings in shunning
mhm.
from a secular and non-secular viewpoint. As I
Okay.
said when I first came on your show,
Mhm. Yeah.
I wanted to be balanced, but it is top heavy on the JWs.
Mhm.
Some of the stuff in my article
Mhm.
may be very new, or a lot of the stuff in my article may be very new to some of your listeners. Other listeners may go, "Oh, I know all about that. I
Mhm.
know about this. I know about that." And that's fine too. I mean, somebody can make it more out of it than somebody else. But again, I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for this um, Virginia Quarterly Review magazine
Mhm.
to hopefully get back to me with a thumbs up. It's going
Mhm.
through the pipeline. I'm just telling you for years, because you want to write, and I'm just going to tell you this because I have submitted other stuff. I have been published. I am blessed.
Ooh,
I'm in my 7th year of publication with
good for
this company.
you.
Yeah, so I'm published, but it's not easy. And especially when you go with these top end magazines that are read all over the world,
Mhm.
they will tell you 6 months to a year before you'll even hear from them. 6 months to a year,
Mhm.
because the number of unsolicited manuscripts that are coming in to the editors is astronomical.
Well, now this explains why. Okay, so here's what we see, right? This is why you're seeing an increasing amount of podcasters, YouTubers,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
number one,
That's right.
people aren't getting on the news, and let's face it,
That's
news
right.
news is entertainment. It's not news, right? So
Right.
people
Right.
want their
Right.
voice to be heard, as they should. So excuse me.
Yeah.
So this is why, if they feel
Mhm,
like their articles aren't getting read, or they're not getting their
mhm,
story out there, this is
mhm.
why people are doing things like this, because the news is really in the hands of the people. And this is why we have
Right.
story on here, because I do believe in each other, we find ourselves. However,
Yeah.
it seems that the most important people to reach also seem like the most difficult to reach. This is what we're finding.
Yeah.
That's every important story.
Yeah.
I mean, I follow so many amazing people who are not JW related, who are in the sex trafficking world, and they're undercover and they're trying to do a lot of things. This is what we're going to do is we're going to keep going. And I'm just thank you for all of the investigative work that you did. And you didn't have to do that. But I do also want to tell you that most of the time when someone leaves the Jehovah's Witness organization, we know more about the organization we were in than we did when we were in it, right? So there are many times that I've read things or watched videos that I'm thinking, oh my God, I was in that religion. I did not know that. That's part of the wake-up process.
Right.
You start to allow yourself to learn things you just did not realize were happening because you have blinders on. You're taught that anything outside organizational documents are forbidden. They're lies. So that's, of course, we're going to learn more the further away we get from the organization. And I'm sure in your article, a lot of people would be blessed to read that.
You already got the story in your head. You can already see it.
I'm always telling a story, always.
Listen, us writers, and I'll include you into that, we are an odd lot of people. Because Wendy, writing is a very solitary profession. On one end of the spectrum. On the other, it's right into all the social stuff that's going on in the world. So when I go out and I do my interviews and I'm writing for this company I told you in Oswego, I have to go out and meet people, and I'm meeting scientists, I'm meeting all that. I'm meeting these incredible people that work with neuroplasticity and quantum physics and blah blah. And I'm in these big clinics and I'm talking to these people. I'm social. I'm recording them. I'm interviewing them. That's the social aspect. Now I go home, I shut the door, everything gets turned off except my mind, that story, and my laptop, and now it's solitary work. So writing is it's odd. You're alone, but you're not alone.
Right. You know, that extroverted arena I struggle with because I am very much an introvert. And people think otherwise just because I do this, but like I could talk to, like Jerry Seinfeld said, I love his quote. He said, like, I could talk to all of you, but I can't talk to any of you.
That's right. That's very interesting.
One of the questions that I have for you is that for me personally, I want to say the right thing. Now, I am a writer. I call myself a hobbyist. I mean, but I know Hemingway said, if you're going to call yourself a writer, then declare yourself the best writer. So I'm working on that. When it comes to writing to politicians or to journalists, is there any way you can help us come up with a template logistically, the right type of wording, the right kind of information, the right format? I think when we sit and when we have this passion as XJWs to let people know, but the execution of it escapes many of us. Do you possibly have a workaround for that, of how to do that?
Yeah, the question is great and it's valid. The answer is the approach and the template, as you would say, differs on each person or entity that you wish to talk to. So sometimes you can cookie stamp, rubber stamp a template and let that go to everybody. That's not always the best way. Depending on what you're asking for and who the person is in the situation, there'll be a different kind of a template. Now, there's certain commonalities, certain things, that you want to always do, no matter what the template may be. But that is,
okay, I'll tell you what I see in some of these letters, because some people do send me letters to read ahead of time.
Right.
If they have links to other articles or links to YouTube videos, will a politician, a congressman, or a journalist even read those? Someone else's content is the question.
Here's the thing. These people are extremely busy.
Right.
Right? Okay. They get requests all day long. As in public speaking, which I have a lot of experience, I was a public speaker too, way back when. Did a lot of public speaking. You've got maybe, people say you got 20 seconds to capture someone. No, you got maybe 10 seconds.
Okay.
Count it, 10 seconds to capture. Otherwise, I'm turning away. I'm not. You're out. You're just not in my head. What can you say in 10 seconds that's going to grab me?
Okay.
Going to hold my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Wendy, today's attention spans with people is not the same attention spans that I had in my day when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. It's all different. Okay. So it makes it harder, but you have to, so that's a commonality through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. How do I grab your attention? Mm-hmm. My opening remarks, you gotta go right for it. You know, you can't go blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, because some people send novels. They send these long novels. My first reaction is it's great.
They don't have the time. It's nice, but they don't have the time. You may know this. When you talk to your assembly woman or man, or you want to contact Governor DeSantis of your state, or you want to contact your senator of your state, or whoever, when you do so, you're going to go through an aide first. There's layers of people. You don't contact, you hardly ever get to talk to them. You talk to their staff. Well, guess what the first thing that staff member does when they get your information? Can you think about can you guess what they do?
Google you?
Yeah,
look at your social media.
Yeah. Well, what they do is when they want to, first of all, they will.
Are you a voter?
Yes, they're going to find out that you're a voter and how many times have you voted. And if they see that you have voted over the last couple of years, and you've been involved in the voting, whether it be for the mayor of your town, or for the Senate, or for Congress, you're or wherever, I don't know, you're voting for
right.
Yeah, whatever whatever.
Right.
They turn around and they run down the hallway to the next person. They go, "We've got a voter," because that means the world to them. You are their lifeblood. So
Here's the problem. Jehovah's Witnesses never voted.
I know they don't. But once they're out, I always try to tell Joe, get out and vote now. And he is. I said, you need to get back into the system of that and vote. Because when I call down in Albany and they run my number through and they run me through, they go, holy, this guy voted every freaking presidential election for the last, whatever. This guy's gold to us. And they will run faster and harder for you if you can show them that you voted. And I don't know if you voted at all over the last couple of years, last 2 years since you've been out.
Yeah, I voted. Well, the first time I was out, I voted in 2020. So yeah.
Good, wonderful. They like to see that. So that's something else for you to think about when you're trying to reach these people. But look, whatever I can do in my capacity, I will. It's no big deal. Just got to let me know. You're not to contact me.
So the first thing they do is they look to see if you're a voter. That's very useful. You hear that, listeners? That is a very useful information. Just for those of you who are looking to reach out to your politician, it's something to consider. Just think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You're our lifeblood. You're a voter. Wow. Oh boy, we're gonna run a little faster for you versus the guy or gal has no track record. They don't vote. Why aren't you voting? They do.
Which is really sad because you think that they would care about citizens regardless. That's
they do, but they care about voters when they need voters. Because why? Because the voters keep their man or woman in office, and it keeps them in a job.
Yeah, it sounds like another cult, David. It's another cult.
Yes, everything is a cult to a certain extent, I guess.
David, it has been such an honor having you on this channel, and we would love to have you back, seeing where the article has gone, and most importantly, thank you for sharing your story, what it's like to be a non-JW and experience acts of shunning.
Well, thank you, Wendy. It was my honor to be on your show, and I hope someday to return and have another conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. And if you want to share your story, you can go to wendyrenee.com/share your story, and the schedule will pop right up. Really great stories up and coming until then. And again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.